Were you ever that one in 1 million? If so, what's your story? Story 1. Hello, fellow storm-watching friend. I wanted to share my experience of getting struck by a feeler of lightning, as the fire department described it. It happened while I was watching a wild thunderstorm and talking on a cordless home phone. My neighbor's house was struck by lightning right by the bedroom window where I was standing, pressed up against the glass. I was on the phone with a friend, marveling at the incredible frequency of the strikes. The next thing I remember was dropping the phone, slowly sinking to the floor, and feeling like time was moving strangely. My mom found me lying there when she came to tell me the neighbor's house was on fire. I was conscious but dazed. She helped me outside, and the fire department told us I'd been zapped, but would be okay. Their advice? Don't be on the phone during a thunderstorm. Thankfully, the fire was small and only burned a hole in their roof, damaging their attic a bit. Everyone walked away safe and sound. Story 2. I've got a story about my eye that still gives me chills. One day, during a sudden windstorm, I was in an open parking lot on the outskirts of the city. A leaf flew right into my eye, and it started hurting immediately. Somehow, I managed to drive home, even though the pain didn't let up. I tried washing my eye out multiple times, but nothing worked. I began to feel movement in my eye, but I couldn't see anything in the mirror. Terrified, I started poking around gently with my finger. Eventually, I saw a tiny little dot move on the tip of my finger. I ran to my mom, showed her, but she couldn't see anything. Honestly, it was so small and barely moved. For an hour, my eye hurt terribly, and I managed to remove 2 more tiny moving creatures. By then, I was convinced I wasn't imagining things. My mom rushed me to an eye surgeon. It was an emergency. The doctor examined me and quickly prepared an operating room. He told me there were living microorganisms in my eye. The procedure took about 20 minutes, and they removed 14 of them, alive. Afterward, I had to wear a pirate-style eye patch for a few days. The doctor said he'd never seen a case like mine in 25 years of practice. He told me I was 1 in a million and warned me that if I had waited a day longer, I might have gone blind. Story 3. When I was a kid, I was severely allergic to ant and bee venom, so much so that a single sting from a common black ant would send me into anaphylactic shock. When my allergist started immunotherapy, he discovered that his lab's equipment wasn't sensitive enough to measure the microscopic amount of allergen needed to begin treatment. My blood had to be sent to Johns Hopkins for analysis so they could determine the precise dosage. I underwent immunotherapy for several years until I reached a safe immune response level. After that, I could finally live in a non-frozen climate without fear of stinging insects. The good news? I'm fine now. Since completing immunotherapy, I've had a few encounters with ants and wasps, but my body hasn't had any severe reactions. Research suggests that if I haven't reacted by now, I'm probably safe for the rest of my life. I don't even carry an EpiPen anymore, and I'm no longer afraid of ants or bees. Here's a quick note to clear up some questions. Yes, I live in Florida. Stinging insects are everywhere. Little black ants do sting. Some subspecies of Lasius ants have venomous stingers, not just mandibles for biting. Fire ants, for example, bite with their jaws and sting with their venomous butt needles at the same time. The last time I checked, studies suggested that my chances of having another reaction are extremely low, so I'm living comfortably without an EpiPen, and I feel safe. Story 4. I was born with 12 fingers, an identical extra digit on each hand. Some backstory: I no longer have the extra fingers because my parents chose to have them removed shortly after I was born. There used to be a video of when everyone in my family first discovered it, but unfortunately, my aunt lost it during one of her moves. The extra fingers were fully functional. They had bones, muscles, tendons, and blood vessels, and they would have moved just like the rest of my fingers. The only limitation was that they couldn't move sideways very far because there wasn't much webbing between my original pinky and the extra one. Today, my hands are completely normal, except for scars on each pinky where the extra fingers were tied off and removed. A fun fact: my older sister had 2 extra toes, but they didn't fully grow. Doctors discovered this in high school when she broke her foot and x-rays revealed extra bones in her feet. These never developed into visible toes. For those wondering, this condition runs in my dad's side of the family. My dad was born with 2 extra teeth, and while my sister and I have different mothers, we both inherited extra digits or bones from him. My parents decided to remove my extra fingers to spare me from potential teasing as I grew up, which I completely understand. Kids can be cruel, and having 12 fingers would likely have made me a target. I still have small scars, but they're barely noticeable. One looks like a tiny mosquito bite, and the other is similar but not raised. Story 5. I was homeless for 4 years, between the ages of 19 and 23. During that time, I earned some extra money by helping out at Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, which had been my favorite hobby since childhood. I became a tournament judge, essentially a referee for the game. However, I struggled because I didn't have a passport, bank account, or the necessary documentation to get a regular job in the UK. Without a passport, it's nearly impossible to prove your right to work, and most companies won't hire you. One day, I got an unexpected phone call from a TV studio asking if I played Yu-Gi-Oh and would describe myself as a geek. They wanted me to be part of a TV show and said they would send me to another country for filming. I told them I didn't have a passport. Their response? No problem. We'll get you one and pay for it ourselves. I ended up on a show called Geeks, which you can still watch on Channel 4 OD. That passport changed my life. After filming the show, I was finally able to get a job, open a bank account, and eventually secure a place to live. Now I'm living a stable life and raising my 10-month-old daughter, who's happily playing as I type this. Yu-Gi-Oh truly saved me from homelessness, and it almost feels like the plot of an anime. For those curious, I had a cheap brick phone, like an old Nokia, that I charged at the local library in Peckham, London. The TV company found me because I was a known judge for local Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments. The show wanted geeks with niche hobbies, and the tournament organizer recommended me. In the UK, you need a government-issued photo ID and a national insurance number to prove your right to work. Without a driver's license, I couldn't drive due to migraines. A passport was my only option. It wasn't easy escaping homelessness. As a 19-year-old with no ID, no address, and no experience, finding a way out was overwhelming. Now, as a 27-year-old, I have a lot more knowledge and perspective, but back then, it felt like an impossible challenge. Looking back, I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunities Yu-Gi-Oh brought me. It gave me a second chance at life, and I've made the most of it. Story 6. I own a Lego minifigure called Mr. Gold. This particular figure was created to celebrate the 10th series of the Lego minifigure line. These figures are sold in blind bags, so you never really know what you're going to get. To make it extra special, Lego decided to only produce 5,000 of them worldwide. As a kid and even now, I was really good at identifying which figure was in a bag just by feeling the pieces. I loved collecting the minifigures because I thought they were cool and unique, so naturally, I wanted Mr. Gold. My mom and I searched everywhere for it, but after a while, I gave up. One day, while at the Lego store, I felt the distinct shape of the diamond piece in one of the bags. I immediately freaked out. Finding Mr. Gold felt like a dream come true. I was 12 years old at the time, and I still remember the pure joy of opening that package. Even now, at 18, I cherish that moment and the memory of my excitement. Story 7. When I was a teenager, I started working at a Sears Auto Center Express lube shop. On my very first day, I went through a quick orientation and performed my first oil change. My manager watched over me for a bit, but once he thought I was ready, he left me to finish on my own. The oil change seemed to go smoothly. A few days later, my manager called me into his office and explained that there had been an issue with the oil filter I used. The filter was pressed on backward into the filter can, which prevented oil from flowing properly and ultimately damaged the car's engine. Sears had to replace the entire motor for the customer. Surprisingly, I kept my job. My manager told me it was a 1 in a million chance for something like that to happen, and it just happened to be on my very first oil change. Story 8. I'm from the Netherlands, and my wife is from the US. We met in Israel. It was my first weekend there, and I decided to join a pub crawl to meet people and have some fun. While buying my ticket, she walked up to the counter to buy hers. The girl working there introduced us, and we hit it off immediately. However, I was leaving in 2 days to stay with friends of friends in the middle of the desert for 3 months. 2 days later, I lost my phone and had no way of getting back in touch with her. I had little money and was committed to staying in the desert, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. After a week, I decided to leave. I took the next bus, which only ran 3 times a week at 5 a.m., and then a train back to Tel Aviv. When I arrived, I emailed several hostels to find a work-stay agreement. These positions are usually planned months in advance, but I got incredibly lucky. One hostel invited me for an interview right away. After securing the job, I dropped off my belongings and went back to the first hostel to ask for information about her. They wouldn't give me anything. Feeling defeated, I wandered around the city for hours. Hungry and tired, I decided to treat myself to a meal at a small, out-of-the-way restaurant. As I was eating, I saw her walking past the window. She saw me and I waved, but she kept walking. She thought I had ignored her after we met because she didn't know I'd lost my phone. I threw far too much money on the table, ran after her, and explained everything. The rest is history. Story 9. I grew up in Florida, spending most of my free time outdoors fishing, camping, and hiking. The summer before my junior year of high school, I went hiking with a friend in some clay deposits near my house. We were exploring a small ravine when it started pouring, a classic Florida rainstorm. Excited by the idea of a potential flash flood, we decided to climb out of the ravine vertically instead of taking the longer, safer path. When I pulled myself up to the top, I felt the ground beneath my foot squirm. I had stepped on a snake. Reflexively, I screamed and kicked it off. As it slithered away, I recognized its red-on-yellow pattern. It was a coral snake. I knew its bite was deadly. We rushed home, and my parents drove me to the hospital. The doctors informed us that the nearest anti-venom was a 3-hour helicopter ride away, but the first symptoms, including lung failure, would occur within 2 hours. My parents called friends and family, and we spent time together without me knowing how close I was to dying. Around 2 hours later, as I lay in the dark with my parents praying by my side, a nurse came in with a gurney to collect my body. I startled her by asking, "Has there been any development?" The doctors were shocked I was still alive. It turned out the snake had delivered a dry bite, meaning it didn't inject venom. They told me to remain dedicated to whatever faith I practiced because I was incredibly lucky to survive. Story 10. When I was 14, I woke up one day with severe stomach cramps. We called the hospital and they suggested it was likely a stomach flu and advised me to see a doctor the next morning. That night was one of the worst of my life. I vomited constantly and ended up sleeping next to the toilet. The next morning, I went to the doctor with a fever of 40 degrees Celsius and a lot of pain. The doctor suspected my appendix was inflamed and sent me to the ER. I stayed in the hospital for about 2 weeks, during which they couldn't find the cause of my symptoms. They treated me with broad-spectrum antibiotics, and I started to feel better. I was discharged and told to recover at home. That night, I started hallucinating. I thought I was living in a retirement home and pirates were coming to steal our food. I flailed around, trying to fend off imaginary pirates, until my mom came in and asked what was happening. She immediately took my temperature, it was 41 degrees Celsius, and rushed me back to the ER. At the hospital, they treated me for inflammation and ran more tests. They determined something in my body was inflamed, but still couldn't locate the issue. After 2 more weeks, they finally discovered the problem. My appendix had burst the night I was hallucinating, but it had been so stretched and the area so inflamed that it didn't show up on scans. The doctor said if I had come in 2 days later, I would have died from the infection spreading throughout my body. After another 2 weeks on antibiotics, they removed my appendix and the pain was finally gone. I spent over 4 weeks in the hospital, all because of my appendix and the unlucky 1% chance that it wouldn't show up on scans. Story 11. When I was 16, I had pygmy glandular fever. There was nothing unusual about that, but a few months later, I developed pneumonia, likely due to a weakened immune system. The pneumonia caused my lungs to collapse, a rare occurrence for a 17-year-old. The hospital I was in couldn't do much more for me, so a rescue team from another hospital arrived with a heart-lung machine. ECMO. These machines are rarely used, and it was only the second time this hospital had transported one. The first time successfully, they transferred me to the other hospital, where I remained in a coma for a few more days. Miraculously, I recovered and was discharged just before Christmas. A major newspaper wanted to feature my story as a Christmas miracle, but I declined. Story 12. Earlier this month, I survived hypothermia. My brother and I were walking to a liquor store in minus 40 degrees Celsius wind chill, already slightly drunk, without checking the weather. After buying the bottle, we headed back to hang out, but I passed out on the way. My brother ran to wake up my dad, who found me, got the truck, and rushed me to the hospital. The doctors told my father there was no hope and to prepare for the worst. I remember waking up briefly while they shoved a breathing tube down my throat. I couldn't breathe and was restrained to the bed, trying to pull it out. A nurse told me to breathe, and I managed one breath every 5 seconds until they removed the tube. When they finally took it out, I gasped for air, feeling immense relief. I was hooked up to several machines, surrounded by 6 medical staff. Then the alarms on the machines went off, and I blacked out again. I went into cardiac arrest for less than 5 minutes, but was successfully revived. After 8 hours of monitoring, I stabilized. I woke up the next day, still heavily sedated on morphine. I remember mumbling to my mom and smiling before passing out again. I survived against the odds. Though my hands had severe frostbite, they recovered fully. Now I'm trying to move forward and live a better life. This experience gave me a new perspective, and I'm determined to make the most of the time I have. Story 13. This isn't my story, it's my wife's. We lived in Jacksonville, Florida. My wife rarely gets sick, though she struggles with mild insomnia. One Wednesday, she developed a low fever, body aches, and night sweats. She also had trouble sleeping. I assumed it was the flu and told her we'd go to the doctor if she still felt bad on Sunday. By Saturday night, she was still unwell, so we made an appointment for Sunday afternoon. However, on the way there, she started feeling better. The doctor examined her, said it was probably meningitis, but that she seemed to be recovering. He assured me it was fine for me to leave for a business trip to California the next day. By that evening, she was laughing and eating like normal. Monday morning, I left early. That afternoon, my neighbor called to tell me my wife was wandering the street in a delirium. She didn't know where she was, so the neighbor took her to the ER. I booked a flight home immediately. At the hospital, her fever was back. Her blood cell count was critically low and she was mentally out of it. Specialists began running tests suspecting an autoimmune disorder. She received blood transfusions and a cocktail of medications while they worked to figure it out. On the third day, an infectious disease specialist identified a blood parasite, possibly tick-borne from a trip she'd taken to the Midwest. The next day, he returned with a shocking update. "Why didn't you tell me she left the country?" She hadn't. "Well, she has malaria." The CDC investigated, set mosquito traps, and even sent vans through the neighborhood spraying chemicals. My wife spent a week in the ICU but recovered fully. If you look at the 2010 CDC infectious disease report, you'll find a discussion about malaria cases related to recent travel, except for one cryptic case in Duval County, Florida. That was her. Story 14. This story is my parents' favorite to tell, the story of how I shouldn't have been born. Both my parents were previously married and had divorced. My dad had 3 kids, and my mom had 1. She spent 7 years undergoing reproductive therapy before finally having my older sister. Fast forward to my parents' relationship. My dad had a vasectomy, and my mom was 40 with multiple medical and reproductive issues. They thought conceiving a child was impossible, so they didn't take precautions. My mom also didn't try to maintain a pregnancy-friendly lifestyle because she didn't think she needed to. During the first 5 or 6 months of pregnancy, before she even knew, she smoked about half a pack of cigarettes a day, worked around hazardous chemicals, rode amusement park rides, and occasionally drank alcohol. By the time she found out she was pregnant, it was too late to terminate. By all accounts, I shouldn't have existed. Even if I did, I should have had some physical or mental disability. Statistically, women over 35 have a higher chance of having a child with Down syndrome, and there are countless studies about the dangers of smoking and drinking during pregnancy. But somehow I was born healthy. Life decided to defy biology, and here I am. Story 15. People might not believe this, but it's 100% true. My girlfriend had a child, and neither of us knew she was pregnant. She's 5'4", and 140 lbs, not super skinny, but definitely not overweight. She never had a noticeable belly. Looking back, some things made sense, like her attitude changes and inability to run, but otherwise, she showed no signs of pregnancy. I had just turned 21. One day, she felt really sick and went to the hospital, thinking it was salmonella poisoning. After running blood tests, the doctors told her she was pregnant and in labor. The craziest part? 3 months earlier, she had gotten an IUD and passed the pregnancy test required for the procedure. When she called me at 7:30 a.m. to tell me, I was in shock. We had always agreed we didn't want kids. I freaked out and hated the situation. I went to the hospital, spent a few awkward hours with her parents, then left to shower and eat. I spent 30 minutes sitting in a Taco Bell, panicking. Eventually, I returned to the hospital and accepted my new reality. I never thought I'd be in this position, but I love my son. It's hard, but I'm glad it happened. Life has a way of surprising you. Story 16. Wow. My life has been a series of rare and challenging events. I was born with red hair, brown eyes, and an extra thumb that was later removed. As a child, I inadvertently saved my mom from being killed by my father, leading to a 16-hour police standoff and her eventual safety. At age 25, I contracted a Clostridioides difficile, C. diff infection, which recurred twice in the past year. A year later, I had a major heart attack at 26 and was diagnosed with a rare genetic cholesterol disorder that clogs my arteries. The antibiotics for the C. diff caused intestinal permeability, which led to numerous food sensitivities. Now, even the slightest trace of potato makes me pass out. Eggs, pork, chicken, certain spices, and nuts all trigger various adverse effects as well. Despite my health battles, I became the 1 in a million guy for my wife. I strive to overcome my health issues, our children's health problems, and the resulting financial struggles to be the best husband and parent I can. It's a constant battle, but I'm doing my best to keep going for my family. Story 17. I have a rare medical condition called cyclic vomiting syndrome, CVS, which causes frequent and unpredictable bouts of nausea and vomiting. My episodes are triggered by stress, anxiety, lack of sleep, or illnesses like the flu. When I was just a year old, I started vomiting uncontrollably around the same time every month. None of the doctors could figure it out until my aunt, who's also a doctor, noticed that my symptoms matched this relatively newly discovered condition. Growing up, I had monthly visits to the hospital to prevent dehydration. The hospital staff knew me well, and I always brought my trusty green bucket. My condition disrupted countless events like birthday parties and summer camps, and caused me to miss up to 30 days of school every year. I tried to keep my condition private to avoid being labeled, so only my close friends and teachers knew. Now, as a college student, I've somewhat grown out of the condition. I don't experience stomach pain anymore, and I vomit less frequently, though the nausea remains. I still miss class about once a week, but I do my best to push through. For anyone with a chronic illness like mine, embrace your life and make the best of it. Don't fear judgment. If someone judges you for something beyond your control, they're not worth your time. Story 18. I have a hypersensitivity to dextromethorphan, the active ingredient in cough syrup. At 18, I had never experimented with drugs or alcohol due to a family history of addiction, but my friends frequently used cough syrup to robo-trip. After months of peer pressure, I finally agreed to try it once. I drank a bottle of Robitussin, waited a bit, and then bam! I was rolling on the floor, confused and miserable. It felt like a terrible dream that wouldn't end. The next day, I woke up groggy and unable to move my legs. I had to crawl to the bathroom and back. A doctor later explained that I had overdosed due to my hypersensitivity. This trip lasted a horrifying 7 days. Some lowlights from that week: I drove a car even though I could barely walk. I attended a job interview, berated the employer for offering part-time hours, and somehow got the job later. I shaved my dog. I wandered in the rain, claiming to hide from Charlie. I unknowingly had my hand up a 15-year-old girl's shirt during a Super Bowl party. She had a crush on me and kept sitting next to me, but I was too out of it to notice. This caused major issues with the girl I was seeing at the time. By the end of the week, I finally felt normal again. I lost the girl I was dating, as my behavior was too absurd to explain. I now avoid cough medicine entirely and stick to living as cleanly as possible. Story 19. My husband and I tried for nearly 4 years to have a baby, but nothing worked. I have PCOS, so my periods were irregular. We tried rounds of Clomid and metformin, which helped regulate my cycles, but still no success. Early last year, we attempted IVF. Both times I responded well, and we retrieved many eggs, but none of the blastocysts made it to day 5. Our doctors were baffled. We decided to take a break that summer for mental, physical, and financial reasons. In August, I started feeling unusually tired and needed a nap every day for a week. On a whim, I told my husband I should take a pregnancy test. To our shock, it was positive. I made him get me a digital test to confirm, and it was positive too. The doctor confirmed the pregnancy, and now I'm 35 weeks along, expecting our miracle baby boy in just a few weeks. Story 20. About a year ago, I parked my car at the university next to my buddy's car and took a picture of them together before heading to class. An hour later, my phone rang. It was a police officer who had gotten my number from the university's help desk. He told me to come to my car immediately. My mind went straight to the small amount of weed I had hidden in the car. From half a mile away, I saw 10 people surrounding my car, later confirmed to be 4 cops, 4 campus security, and 2 men in black. When I got there, the cops verified my identity, asked to see my recent photos, and began searching my car. Then they arrested me for intimidating someone. I was clueless. On the way to the station, the officers said I'd messed with the wrong person, a psychopath, who would have killed me if the police hadn't arrested me first. At the station, they interrogated me for 2 hours, claiming I was on camera and needed to confess. When I called my dad, he rushed over and convinced them I wasn't involved. It turned out someone had sent a photo similar to the one I'd taken to harass and intimidate another student. Security footage showed that during the hour I was in class, a car stopped near mine for 5 seconds to take a picture. The girls in the car later admitted they had taken the photo and sent it. My decision to snap an innocent picture of my car almost landed me in jail. Story 21. A few years ago, my period suddenly stopped. I wasn't pregnant, didn't have cancer, STIs, or any major lifestyle changes. My doctor could have brushed it off as stress from college, but she ordered some blood tests. After months of testing, endocrinologist visits, and an MRI, I was diagnosed with a prolactinoma, a tumor on my pituitary gland. The tumor produces excess prolactin, the hormone for breast milk, tricking the body into thinking it's pregnant. If you ever experience unexplained period stoppage, don't ignore it. While it may not be a prolactinoma, it's worth investigating. Prolactinomas can cause vision problems, fertility issues, and other complications if left untreated. Story 22. I work in aviation and always dreamed of becoming a pilot. When I applied for a pilot position at my company, they told me I wasn't experienced enough and suggested I try again in a year. I had already worked there for 3 years, so I decided to wait. A year later, I gained more experience and asked about the next hiring process. They said there wouldn't be one that year due to a transition to new aircraft models. Frustrated, I reached out to a highly sought-after unit to the south. This unit is notoriously competitive, but I called in every favor, got recommendation letters, and went all in for the application. After a grueling interview process with many other candidates, I drove home unsure of how I did. As I pulled into my driveway, I got a call congratulating me on being selected. Hearing the cheers of the interviewers on the other end made me tear up. Achieving my lifelong dream was one of the happiest moments of my life. Story 23. When Quantum of Solace premiered, my local theater held a big event with giveaways. They shot t-shirts wrapped with prizes from the mall rooftop using a t-shirt cannon. The grand prize was free movie tickets for a year. My friends and I spread out in the crowd of about 1,000 people. I caught several t-shirts because I was surrounded by smaller kids who couldn't grab them. Seeing how disappointed they were, I started giving away my extra shirts. I kept just one shirt for myself and stuffed it into my jacket. After the giveaway ended, my friends and I opened our shirts to see what we'd won. When I opened mine, I found a large paper that read, "Free movies for a year." My friends couldn't believe it. After giving away so many t-shirts, I'd kept the one with the grand prize. It was pure luck and an unforgettable moment. Story 24. I've had 2 incredibly rare medical experiences in my life, both of which I survived against the odds. Growing up, I was a relatively healthy kid despite developing Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, but in my 20s, my body seemed to turn on me. I developed type 1 diabetes, costochondritis, pleurisy, fibromyalgia, gastroparesis, chronic kidney stones from a metabolic issue, and neuropathy. The neuropathy wasn't surprising. I hadn't been great about managing my diabetes early on. When my gallbladder started acting up, I thought it would be a straightforward problem, surgery, recovery done. So I had it removed laparoscopically, but afterward I didn't feel better. I was retaining over 20 pounds of water and couldn't walk 5 steps without needing to sit down. The doctor's office assured me it was normal post-surgery water retention, but at my follow-up appointment, the surgeon noticed how pale I looked and sent me straight to the ER. At the hospital, they drained 2 liters of fluid from my lungs, put me on diuretics, and administered other medications. Finally, a doctor told me I had congestive heart failure. I was shocked. Not like failure, right? I asked. The answer was grim. It was full-on heart failure. Over the next 2 years, I fought my way back to health with medication, weekly visits to a heart hospital, and a lot of support from my family. Slowly, my condition improved. By last September, my cardiologist grinned as he told me that my heart function had returned to normal. My ejection fraction, which had been below 10% when I was admitted, was now in the healthy range. Though I'd need to stay on medication, I was effectively cured. The cardiologist called it a miracle and said I should try my luck in Vegas. Another brush with death came from diabetic ketoacidosis, DKA, a dangerous complication of diabetes. One day, I got very sick and my blood sugar skyrocketed. I blacked out for 3 days. My mom found me on the floor, naked and panting, but unresponsive. She called paramedics who rushed me to the hospital. I was in critical condition with heart and kidney failure and heavily sedated while intubated. Doctors found a suspicious result. My blood tested positive for propylene glycol, a chemical sometimes found in antifreeze. They suspected I'd ingested poison, possibly intentionally. My family tore my room apart looking for evidence, but found nothing. Despite the confusion, they decided to administer the antidote for propylene glycol. The response was remarkable. I improved rapidly. Once I stabilized, the test results were reevaluated. It turned out the propylene glycol result had been a false positive caused by the chemical processes of DKA. Yet somehow, the antidote worked. The ER doctor told me my acetone levels were far beyond the fatal limit. It was miraculous that I not only survived but regained full organ function within 2 weeks of leaving the hospital. To this day, I wonder why the antidote worked despite the false positive, but I'm grateful it did. Twice now, I've narrowly escaped death, and both times the doctors joked that I should head to Vegas. If my survival odds are any indicator, maybe I should. Story 25. When I was little, a sleep study revealed that I'm essentially a zombie. I had sleeping problems. Insomnia made it hard for me to fall asleep. And once I did, I wouldn't wake up easily. During the study, The doctors discovered that when I sleep, my body shuts down entirely. My heart stops. My brain activity drops to almost nothing, and I don't breathe or move at all. The doctors had to wake me several times, unsure of what was happening. Eventually, they let me sleep, and I remained in this near-death state for 2 hours before waking up completely fine. This condition still affects me. I don't dream or perceive time while I'm asleep. It feels like I instantly transition from being awake to waking up. It has led to severe sleep issues, random pains, heart palpitations, muscle spasms, and even brain problems. No one knows what's going on or how to treat it. As a child, I even survived weeks without sleep during the early stages of my insomnia. While I managed to stay functional, it left a lasting impact on me. Story 26. I have pulmonary hypertension, PH, a condition that affects about 1 in a million people. It's a brutal disease that makes life feel like I'm constantly sprinting, gasping for air, and overexerting my muscles. This happens because the blood vessels supplying oxygen to my blood are restricted, forcing the right side of my heart to work harder. This also means I essentially have 2 separate heartbeats, one on each side of my heart. A major challenge with PH is that I don't look sick. People often assume I'm just tired or lazy because I need a lot of rest. Even regular doctors often misunderstand the condition, and it takes an average of 3 years to get a proper diagnosis. Without treatment, the life expectancy for PH is only 5 years. I take sildenafil, a drug initially developed to treat PH. Its well-known side effect is now marketed as Viagra. I take 50 milligrams 3 times a day, which helps, but it comes with its challenges. If I'm intimate with my wife, I get about 5 minutes of enjoyment followed by 5 hours of exhaustion. Story 27. I have a rare genetic eye disorder called retinitis pigmentosa, RP, which affects a little over 2,000 Americans. It's a degenerative disease that slowly narrows my field of vision, and no glasses or surgery can correct it. Explaining my symptoms to doctors has been frustrating. Most haven't encountered RP, and many tests initially showed nothing wrong. The easiest way to describe my vision is to imagine looking through the cardboard center of a paper towel roll. My right eye has a severely limited field of vision, while my left eye isn't as bad for now. RP progresses unpredictably, but my doctor estimates I could be blind by age 50. I'm 25 now, so I still have some time left with my current vision. Recently, a treatment for RP was developed, but it costs $800,000. For most of my life, I believed I just have to accept going blind, but now there's hope. It's expensive, but it represents a glimmer of possibility for me and others with rare genetic disorders. Story 28. This might be one of the rarest poker stories ever. I was at a casino playing $1, $2 no-limit hold'em with about 6 other players. A new guy joined the table, clearly a relative newbie. About 30 minutes later, he got into a hand where the board showed AAA 9. The other player bet $25 on the river, and the new guy folded, saying, "Well, all I have is a full house. You must have an ace, so I'll lose." We all froze. The other player asked, "Wait, what did you just say?" It turned out the new guy had JJ, aces full of jacks, and folded, while the other player had AQ, quad aces. This would have qualified for the bad beat jackpot, which was $10K for the losing hand, $5K for the winner, and $1K for every player at the table. But since the new guy had already mucked his cards, there was nothing we could do. We were devastated for him, and for us, as we missed out on the $1K table share. Then just 5 hands later, the same guy ended up in another hand with me and another player. This time, the board ran Q66QA. He had AA, aces full of queens. The other player had QQ, quad queens, and I had a busted flush. This qualified as another bad beat. The new guy got his $10K, the other player got $5K, and the rest of us got $1K each. The odds of this happening, 2 bad beat qualifying hands, with the same guy involved at the same table within 5 hands, are truly astronomical. It was a once-in-a-lifetime event for everyone there. Story 29. When I was 10, I had an ovarian cyst that twisted and died, growing to the size of a baseball when it should have been the size of an almond or walnut. Initially, the doctors thought it was cancer. During my surgery, my sister overheard the medical team discussing the procedure. She threw up, fainted, and had to be admitted herself. Meanwhile, the doctors removed 1 ovary, a fallopian tube, and my appendix. They even sewed my remaining ovary into my abdomen to prevent future torsions. 2 weeks after the surgery, my family moved to Texas, but I had to stay behind with my mom because I wasn't cleared to fly. 2 years later, at the age of 12, I developed another massive ovarian cyst, requiring surgery again. Despite losing one ovary and all the complications, I still have one ovary left, which so far is hanging in there. Story 30. When I was 16 and learning to drive, I told my mom I was too tired to drive home from a music lesson. It was rush hour, but she insisted I drive anyway. At a busy 4-lane road, I asked her which way to turn. She told me left, but then immediately changed it to no, right. I froze in panic, and before I could react, a truck with bad brakes rammed into the driver's side of the car. The impact was horrifying. My head slammed into the window, the car crumpled beneath me, and the horn blared endlessly. Emergency vehicles arrived, and I was pulled through the passenger side window. I hyperventilated as strangers tried to comfort me. At the hospital, doctors discovered a chip at the top of my spine. I had to wear a neck brace for 5 weeks. 2 days later, we visited my mom's totaled car. She had made her final payment on it the day of the accident. The mechanics who assessed the car were stunned when they saw me. They said I should have been paralyzed or dead given the damage. They were certain I had a guardian angel watching over me. Story 31. This is probably a 1 in 1 billion moment. My name is John, and my best friend Caleb has a hot mom named Donna. Naturally, I like to give him a hard time about it because that's what friends do. One night, Caleb and I were drunk at a karaoke bar. For fun, I turned in my song request to the DJ, but signed my name as John Donna, a mashup of my name and Caleb's mom's name. The plan was for the DJ to announce, "Up next is John Donna," and it worked. I thought it was hilarious. I walked up to the stage to grab the mic when suddenly a woman approached me, grabbed the mic and said, "Nice try, but I'm John Donna." Confused, I asked, "Your name is John Donna?" She confirmed and even asked the DJ to show me her song card. Sure enough, there it was. John Donna, written in handwriting that wasn't mine. I've never met or heard of anyone with that name, and the odds of meeting someone named John Donna while out with Caleb and having this clash at the karaoke stage. It's the most random star-aligned thing that's ever happened to me. Story 32. When my brother was in college, he contracted a flesh-eating bacteria. At the time, I was in high school, and watching him go through it was terrifying. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital as doctors tried to find an antibiotic to stop the infection. His arm was sliced open in several spots, and he had to go through daily flushings to clean out the infection. It was painful, and he was on a lot of medication. The worst part was seeing the infection creep closer to his heart day by day as antibiotic after antibiotic failed to stop it. In a desperate move, the doctors considered giving him penicillin as a last resort, even though he's extremely allergic to it. Thankfully, they identified an effective antibiotic just in time. After several days of treatment and skin grafts, he finally recovered and was able to come home. It was one of the scariest times of our lives, but we were so relieved he survived. Story 33. When I was 16, I worked at a big box craft store during the busy Christmas season. One day, a large man came to my register with a ton of expensive die-cut supplies and a machine. The total came to almost $1,000. He told me his wife had always wanted one, and he wanted to surprise her for Christmas. He handed me a stack of cash to pay, and when I marked the bills with a counterfeit pen, 4 of the $100 bills came up fake. I'd never encountered counterfeit money before, so I started pressing random buttons on the register to make it beep. The man asked, "Is everything okay?" I smiled and said, "Yes, it's just telling me I need a manager because it's a lot of cash." I walked over to my manager, who immediately called the cops. Right then, an off-duty police officer in full uniform walked into the store to do some Christmas shopping. We told him what was happening, and he arrested the man on the spot. It turned out the guy was part of a massive counterfeit ring that had been causing problems in the city. His arrest ultimately helped take down 2 others in the operation. What started as an ordinary workday ended up helping to stop a major crime ring. Story 34. This just happened yesterday, and I'm still in disbelief. I've been collecting old photos and postcards for years. I buy them from estate sales, garage sales, flea markets, and antique stores, and now I have hundreds. They're mostly of strangers, but I find them fascinating, like a window into the past. Last night, I decided to reorganize my collection. I came across a postcard addressed to Kurt Benson, which happens to be my uncle's name. Intrigued, I sent a picture of it to my mom, who happened to be with my uncle at the time. I told her it was dated 1916 and signed by someone whose name started with an E. My mom asked about the address. I could barely make it out, but it seemed to say River and something like Nebraska. When I asked why, she mentioned that her grandfather, my uncle's namesake, had lived in Wood River, Nebraska. I looked closer, and the postcard indeed said Wood River. We realized the card was addressed to my great-grandfather, Kurt Benson, who lived in Wood River, Nebraska in 1916. It was signed by Einer, which matches the name of his father, my great-great-grandfather. The front of the postcard shows a group of people in a car. Back then, it was common to print personal photos onto postcards for mailing. It's possible my great-great-grandfather is in the photo. Somehow, this postcard traveled through time and ended up in an antique store, where I unknowingly purchased a piece of my own family history 100 years later. Story 35. I've had a couple of close calls where my life was saved by pure luck or someone stepping in at the right time. The first time was when I was 7. A dog attacked me and nearly mauled my face. It was my friend's neighbor's dog, and I was seconds away from having my throat or face torn apart. I instinctively put my arm in the way, but it was getting shredded. It wouldn't have lasted much longer. Out of nowhere, a man stepped in, fought the dog off, and carried me home. I ended up with 127 scars from the attack, but it could have been so much worse without his intervention. The second time, I was biking home from work down a hill. The bike slipped out from under me, and I slid into the grass. I was angry about falling, until a truck sped by, spinning out of control on the exact spot where I would have been if I hadn't fallen. The driver stopped, visibly shaken, and asked how I'd known he lost control. I told him I hadn't. It was just pure coincidence. If I hadn't fallen at that exact moment, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. Story 36. When I was 11 years old, I attended a volleyball camp during the summer between elementary and middle school. One day, I started having sharp, wave-like pains in my pelvic area. At first, I thought it might be period cramps, but I wasn't sure. I mentioned it to my coach at the end of the day, and he dismissed it as muscle cramps from the intense conditioning we'd been doing. Seemed reasonable, so I followed his tips and went home. 2 days later, the pain returned, sharper and longer lasting. I told my coach again, but this time he was visibly frustrated and wrote me off as lazy. I tried to push through the pain, but it quickly became unbearable. The contractions got closer together. The pain intensified, and I started seeing black spots and getting tunnel vision. I felt like my waistband was tightening around the pain, and I knew something was horribly wrong. I asked my coach if I could call my mom, but he refused. Instead, he yelled at me, accusing me of trying to avoid hard work. I tried to keep going, but eventually ran for the locker room when I felt an overwhelming urge to vomit. He yelled, "If you leave this court, you're out of the camp with no refund." I grabbed my lunchbox and made it outside, where I vomited all over the sidewalk. A kind older camper had slipped her phone into my lunchbox earlier, and I used it to call my mom. She was at work 25 minutes away, but my grandmother lived nearby and came to get me. I don't remember much after that. I was lying in the fetal position, surrounded by my own vomit when she arrived. She brought me to the ER, where the doctor initially thought my appendix had burst. After hearing about the vomiting, sharp contractions, and the pain, he ordered a CT scan and a urine test instead of an X-ray. My urine was bright pink from blood. The scan revealed I had 75, 100 kidney stones in each kidney, and had passed one in the ER. There was even a stone in the urine sample. The diagnosis shocked everyone, including the team of specialists who saw me later. I was referred to some of the best hospitals in the state, where I became a teaching case for resident doctors. It turned out I have a rare kidney disease that affects the pH levels of my body fluids, causing chronic, recurring kidney stones. This condition is rare in adults and even rarer in children, especially little girls. As for that coach, my dad confronted him the next day with my medical diagnosis and called the school superintendent. It turned out I wasn't the first person to have issues with him. Within a year, he was fired for multiple complaints, including spying on girls in the locker room and even sexually assaulting a few. My dad also made sure we got that refund. It was a traumatic experience, but at least the day I was diagnosed helped expose a truly awful person. Story 37. This is one of the most bizarre coincidences I've ever experienced. I was at the Austin City Limits ACL Music Festival with some friends, waiting for Paul McCartney to perform. Another friend, Ashley, was arriving late and asked if she and her friends could meet up with us to grab a spot for the show. She gave my number to one of her friends to coordinate. About an hour before Sir Paul was set to start, I got a text. "Hey, this is Matt, Ashley's friend. Where are you guys?" We exchanged messages trying to describe landmarks to meet up. When they couldn't locate us, we agreed to meet near the bathrooms, and he told me he'd be wearing an Antisocial Social Club, ASSC shirt. I found 2 guys near the bathrooms, one of them in an ASSC shirt, and introduced myself. We started chatting, and they asked how I knew Ashley. I explained that she used to live in Dallas, had been married to a friend of mine, but we'd stayed in touch. At this point, they looked puzzled. They said they didn't know she had been married or lived in Dallas. I shrugged it off, assuming Ashley hadn't shared those details. But then they mentioned that they knew Ashley from a Boston area university, a school I knew she hadn't attended. It quickly became clear we were talking about two completely different Ashleys. After cross-referencing last names, we realized they had meant to text a number that was one digit off from mine. But here's the crazy part. They had texted the wrong number. That number, mine, happened to belong to someone also at ACL. I was also waiting to hear from friends of an Ashley. The mix-up only became apparent because both Ashleys were connected to people attending the same festival in Texas, despite one being from Boston and the other from Dallas. We stood there dumbfounded, shared a beer, laughed about the insane coincidence, and then went our separate ways. I hope those guys had a great time at the festival because I'm still in awe of the odds of that happening. Story 38. When I was about 18 months old, I had a near-death experience that still amazes my family. I was walking with my grandpa, dad, and older brothers from the barn to the house. At some point, my grandpa veered toward the shed, while everyone else continued toward the house. Unbeknownst to anyone, I followed my grandpa. While he went into the shed, I stopped to play in the dirt. A few moments later, he got into his Dodge truck and backed it out of the shed, right over me. He didn't see me at all. No one realized what had happened until I started screaming. The truck had driven directly over my legs. My parents raced me to the hospital, panicking about the worst-case scenario. But partway through the drive, I started fussing less and even tried to stand up. That's when they realized I might actually be okay. At the hospital, the doctor showed them the x-rays. The tire tracks were visible on the bones of my legs, but somehow I was completely fine. The truck had missed crushing my bones by mere inches. It was a 1 million miracle. If the truck's position had been slightly different, I wouldn't be here to tell the story. My parents still talk about how terrifying that day was, but also how grateful they are for that stroke of luck. Story 39. It was the summer of 2009, a scorching hot day. My siblings and I were battling the heat in the best way we knew, with our beloved slip and slide. This wasn't just a toy, it was practically a family member. On this particular day, we decided to host the Slip and Slide Olympics, timing our runs for the ultimate prize, eternal glory. When my turn came, I prepared to dethrone my brother, the reigning champion of slip and slide mastery. My sister held our mom's phone, ready to time my run. She started the countdown. 3, 2, 1. I took off like a human cannonball, sprinting as fast as my extra thick 5'5" frame could manage. I jumped, landed on my knees, and zoomed down the slide at maximum speed. I looked like a giant, determined meatball careening toward victory. But then disaster struck. As I passed the midpoint of the slide, my body came to an abrupt halt. My brother screamed in horror. Confused, I looked down and saw a bloodbath. My leg was gushing blood, but I couldn't see the wound or move my leg. Panic set in. It turned out I'd been impaled by a buried sprinkler head, a sneaky little devil no one even knew was there. It had decided to make its grand reappearance right during the Slip and Slide Olympics. I yanked the sprinkler head out of my leg, sat there screaming, and stared at the gaping hole it left behind. My siblings ran to get my parents, who came out and stared at me in shock. But instead of taking me to the hospital, my dad, armed with zero medical experience, decided that butterfly stitches, aka crisscross tape, would do the trick. A few days later, we visited the doctor, who was horrified that I hadn't gone to the ER immediately. She said it was a very deep and nasty wound, one that should have been treated professionally. Needless to say, I haven't touched a slip and slide since. Story 40. I was born with an extremely rare genetic condition called tibia aplasia. Essentially, I'm missing the largest bone in my lower legs, the tibia, the one crucial for standing and walking. As a result, I also have missing or deformed fingers and toes. My condition is proportional. I have 4 fingers and toes on my left side and 2 on my right. Doctors in both Croatia and Germany studied my case extensively, and as far as they knew, I was the first person in Europe with this diagnosis who was able to walk using prosthetic legs. When I was a baby in a German hospital 25 years ago, the doctors estimated there were only about 10 cases like mine in Europe, which has a population of 740 million people. That puts the odds at roughly 1 in 74 million. Even more astonishing, I later met a child from my hometown who had the same diagnosis, though with more severe consequences. Growing up, my parents treated me like any other kid, refusing to coddle me. Their approach worked. I finished 2 college degrees, worked full-time, and even competed in the 2012 Paralympic Games, where I reached the swimming finals. Despite the challenges, I've handled my condition well and feel grateful for the opportunities it's given me. It's a rare life, but a fulfilling one. Story 41. It all started when I noticed something weird with my vision while at the mall. After seeing several eye doctors, they all told me the same thing. It's not your eye that's the problem, it's something behind the eye. Translation, my brain. My parents rushed me to the ER, and after a ton of tests and an MRI, the doctors came back with a shocking diagnosis. I'd had a pediatric stroke at the age of 14. A small aneurysm in the back left part of my brain, the area that controls vision, had caused it. They ran countless tests to figure out why it happened, but came up empty. Pediatric strokes are already incredibly rare, like a 0.2% chance, and having one with no identifiable cause is even rarer. The good news? Statistically, if they can't find a reason, you're less likely to have another stroke. So, yay me. The only lasting effect is that I lost the upper right quarter of my vision. Otherwise, I'm fine. Now I get to enjoy endless stroke jokes about being a one-stroke wonder or having a stroke of luck. Story 42. When I was about 12, my family visited my aunt in Florida, and we went to SeaWorld. My aunt, who had a BlackBerry phone and one of those pocket holsters, joined us on the Kraken roller coaster. It was a 4-person wide ride with my 2 sisters, my aunt, and me on one end and her on the other. During one of the loops, her phone flew out of the holster. None of us realized it at the time because, well, we were on a roller coaster. As we came out of the loop, something landed right in my lap. I looked down, confused, and saw her phone. I quickly grabbed it before it could fall again. At the end of the ride, I casually asked to see her phone, pretending to have no idea what had happened. When I finally told her the story, she couldn't believe it. The odds of her phone falling out mid-ride and landing perfectly in my lap instead of flying off into oblivion were insane. Story 43. Just last week, I nearly snapped my own neck drying my hair. It was a normal day and I had just finished taking a shower. I grabbed a towel and started drying my hair like I always do. But somehow I managed to push my head to the right too hard. My spine made an incredibly unhealthy clicking sound, and I instantly felt a wave of pain. My body started shaking and my skin turned chalk white. Ignoring the pain, I bent down to grab my underwear, but the movement made it worse. By the time I stood up and looked in the mirror, my vision was fading, and I screamed for my little brother in the next room. The next thing I remember, I was lying on the bathroom floor, soaking wet, shivering, and in immense pain. I had a bump above my left eye from hitting the floor, and I was only wearing underwear. My little brother stood next to me with the most bored expression imaginable. He later told me he'd been standing there for 2 minutes just watching me. For days, I couldn't move my head to the left or tilt it backward. Thankfully, it eventually healed, but it left me realizing how easy it is to seriously injure or even kill yourself doing something completely mundane. Who knew drying your hair with a towel could be more dangerous than wrestling? Lesson learned. Story 44. When I was in my early 20s, I woke up one day to find that the radial nerve in my right arm had been completely destroyed. It happened suddenly and without warning during a 2-hour nap. Before the nap, I was completely fine. No trauma, no pain, nothing. When I woke up, my right hand was completely limp at the wrist and I couldn't even wiggle my fingers. Initially, doctors thought it was a pinched nerve that would heal within a month. But after 2 years, 10 doctors, and countless tests, they finally determined that I likely had Parsonage-Turner syndrome, P. Turner syndrome, a condition caused by an unidentified virus that attacks nerves seemingly at random. This syndrome wasn't even widely recognized until the mid-2000s, when a famous fighter experienced it and brought it to public attention. The radial nerve is responsible for controlling finger, wrist, and forearm movement, so I had to relearn how to do everything with my left hand. Adapting to being left-handed wasn't easy, but I managed to adjust. It's surreal to think that something as simple as a nap completely changed my life. Story 45. This happened when I was 9, around 2015, and it's one of the craziest things to ever happen to me. My brother and I were playing in the yard with a bouncy ball when it rolled down a steep hill into a nearby meadow. I looked left, no cars. I looked right, no cars. So I crossed the street to retrieve the ball, but got distracted by what I thought was a stray cat. The cat let me pet it, and when I tried to pick it up to show my brother, it attacked my arm viciously. I ran back across the street without looking, and the cat followed me. In a panic, I drop-kicked it and ran home. My brother helped clean my arm, but I was still bleeding heavily. When he turned my arm over, we saw a huge gash across the inside of my elbow. The wound was gruesome. My vein was barely missed, but nerves were severed. The skin was peeled back, exposing fat and muscle. Both of us threw up at the sight. When my mom got home, she rushed me to the hospital. The doctors couldn't stitch the wound because they didn't know what kind of animal had attacked me. They asked if I wanted a rabies shot, and I said yes. The next day we returned to the hospital and they informed us that the animal had been found. It wasn't a stray cat, it was a young mountain lion. I'd mistaken it for a big house cat because I was used to living with a large pet cat. The attack was a historic event. It was the first recorded mountain lion attack in Rome, Georgia, and the first sighting of one in the area in 60 years. Now I have a cool scar on my arm, and when people ask about it, I casually say, "Oh, I was attacked by a mountain lion." Their reactions are priceless. Some are impressed, others are shocked, but no one ever expects that story. Story 46. This happened on a wild night that started pretty normal and ended with me $1,000 richer, hanging out with the queer 1% and questioning the concept of karma. It all began at a bar where I was drinking beer and feeling euphoric. My friends left, so I wandered outside and started chatting with random people, as one does after a few drinks. In my drunken generosity, I gave all my money to some homeless guys and spent some time talking to them about their lives and politics. Feeling good about my good deeds, I decided it was time to head home before I gave away my coat or something. Then I saw him, a young, distraught twink, maybe 27, walking aimlessly with tears streaming down his face and snot running from his nose. I stopped to give him a tissue. I always carry them because you never know when someone will need one, and asked if he was okay. He clung to me, sobbing, and explained that he'd lost his wallet and phone and couldn't remember where his hotel was. Mother hen mode activated. I used my phone to look up his hotel, which turned out to be literally around the corner. I walked him there, half babysitting and half pitying him. The hotel lobby screamed wealth, fireplaces, fancy furniture, uniformed attendants. Later, I looked it up and found out rooms cost $500 a night. This guy starts whining to the staff about losing his wallet and wandering around in the cold. I was mortified by his entitled attitude, but the staff handled it with grace. I was impressed by their professionalism. At this point, my job was done and I was ready to leave. But the twink invited me to his room and I figured I'd make sure he got there safely. His room was absurd. High ceilings, a massive bed, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a plate of perfectly arranged berries. I felt like I had stumbled into a movie. Naturally, we started eating the berries and chatting. Apparently, this twink had flown in on his friend's private jet, gotten drunk on a helicopter ride, and somehow ended up wandering the streets of New York City alone in a t-shirt. Then things got even weirder. He stripped down to his underwear and started running a bath. While I was trying to give him some privacy, he found his backup iPhone, because of course he has a backup. Losing phones is apparently his thing, and FaceTimed his friends. And then he pulled out a Versace bag stuffed with stacks of $100 bills. I had never seen that much cash in my life. He counted out $1,000, handed it to me, and thanked me for helping him. I was absolutely floored. With his phone and cash situation sorted, we went to meet his friends at a club. They were the epitome of queer upper class, tall, thin, white, impeccably dressed. Meanwhile, I was rocking a giant puffy coat and a messy appearance, looking and feeling like a street urchin among royalty. Surprisingly, his friends were kind and even praised me for helping their friend. They bought me drinks and welcomed me into their world for the night. I ended the night richer, slightly tipsy, and even went home with a hot guy, though I'm now anxiously awaiting test results after a herpes scare. Moral of the story, what goes around comes around. I started the night giving what little I had to those in need, and by the end, I received a windfall from a drunken, ultra-rich twink. Life works in mysterious ways.